Right, sorry I'm late, guys. I'm ready for our Star Trek game. What do you mean we're not playing Star Trek? Oh, well then, what are we playing? 40k? I've never played 40k. Oh dear. Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Be a Great Player. And in particular, we're looking at how to be a great player in almost any type of setting, even if you haven't ever heard of the setting before. So what happens? You arrive at your regular game only to notice, well, they're not playing the regular game because Sally, Frank and Joan can't make it, so they've decided to do a special run of a Doctor Who setting. And you go, Doctor Who, and they say yes, and you say, no, who? They say yes, you say, no, who? And they say yes. And it just gets silly from there. So how do you adapt your brain to playing in a world that you haven't got a clue on? Because the last thing you want to do is nerve pinch that Dalek whilst flying around on the Millennium Falcon. All you'll do is upset every Battlestar Galactica fan out there. See what I mean? So when you arrive at a game and you haven't got a clue what the setting is about, if you don't really have a lot of prep time, these are my tips on how to integrate yourself so that you can flawlessly fit in with almost any game setting without too much of a hassle. Now these rules are not hard and fast, and they are pretty generic, but they've certainly seen me being able to wing my way through conventions all over the country and playing in all sorts of systems and all sorts of settings that I've never even heard of. So, first up, number one. If you have any opportunity, jump onto your phone. With the internet in our pockets, there is no reason why you can't say, all right guys, I'm just going to the loo to drop the goblins off at the pool, to use a local saying from our one player. And you head on over to the bathroom, open up YouTube and how to play a 40k setting. Who is Doctor Who? Etc, etc, etc. 5 minutes later, you step out and you've had a crash course in the setting, at least, that you are going to be playing in. But this doesn't necessarily make you an expert on just what the Colonnar is and why Vulcans think it's so important. So the next step, the step that you use to build on, is you can ask your players briefly. So, just what is this Battlestar Galactica and why are the toasters killing us? Ask around. But again, you might not necessarily have enough time. So, number two, always play a human whenever possible. Humans in almost all systems are almost always the same. We are the generic template around which else all other creatures, all other species, all other races are based. And generally speaking, there will almost always be humans around. The most bizarre science fiction that I can think of is Titan AE, where humans are on the decline and are a minority species, but there are still humans, and they behave exactly how humans behave today. So try and find the human race, or at least a race that is most human-like if you're in a totally bizarre setting. Even in a fantasy setting, humans are invariably always around. So go for a human. Thirdly, go for a fighter type. Go for someone who believes in close combat melee. You cannot stuff up using an axe, a sword, a pipe, a chair, or a table, or another person to hit someone with. It doesn't matter what setting you're in. So even if you're in Warhammer 40k and you're using a chainsaw, or you're in Star Wars and you're using a lightsaber, or you're in Star Trek and you're using a bat'leth, they all do the same thing. You hit your opponent with them until they stop moving. Generally speaking, also the fighter types or the close combat types in science fiction and in fantasy have very little rules knowledge required. What do I roll to hit my opponent and how much damage do I do? Is invariably the only question you should be asking. Let the wizards and the priests worry about how to draw their spells out of the ether, how to focus on the force, or how to draw their inner Gaia out so that they can control the planet. So go for a fighter type. Then finally, or not finally, I should say number 4, is in terms of your character's history, go to the GM and say, listen, I do not know this system, but I love playing with you guys and I think you're a great GM. Never hurts to butter up the GM. But would you mind if I started the session unconscious? and naked and in a box. The GM will look at you as if you possibly from planet Mars, but he should, or she should, immediately latch onto the idea that there's a character who starts inside a box and naked. Where is the box? Who has the box? Why is the character in the box? Why are they naked? All of these just pose plot questions which they can use in their own story. So it's a benefit for them. The benefit for you, however, is that you can then spring out of the box or wake up in the box or be in a box owned by one of the other players, and when they open the lid, you wake up and you go, "Ah, who am I? Where am I? What are we doing? Who are you? Why am I here? Why am I holding this insert appropriate weapon? I have no memory of my past. Where are we? I don't even know where we are. I don't even know how I'm talking." The old amnesia trick works almost every time, and then it will allow you to say, "Klingons? Aren't they the good guys? No? Oh. I don't remember. I don't remember." So by saying that you don't remember, by having medical amnesia, it allows you for at least the first session to wing your way through, make some mistakes that the rest of the PCs and the rest of the players will forgive you for, so that after the session you can then rush off as quickly as you can and to go and do some research on the setting. Now, I would always advocate that before you start playing in a foreign system, that you do a little bit of research on it, and that you say, well, let me identify just exactly what is IDIC, or why should I follow the Jedi Code. Those are some of the easier ways of tricking your way through the system. Another way to do it, and this is to use the different types of character that I have discussed at length in previous videos, is to either play the sole character or to play the ambassador. I take that straight back. Sorry, in my notes I wrote ambassador and realized that it was being a complete tit. What I meant to say is that you need to play the protector. So the protector and the soul provide you with role-playing opportunities, but also do not have any direct relationship or direct command over where the party should go and what it should do and what it shouldn't do. The soul is busy looking for the beauty of the moment and is perfectly allowed to wander through the castle, gawking at the high ceilings and marveling at the doors, and asking the GM for more details than you might normally. So I'm inside the Death Star. What are the color of the lights? How high are the ceilings? What do the elevators look like? What do they smell like? How do I access a gravitational beam controller in the gravitational beam control room? What does it look like? So as the soul, you can be trying to tap for more information simply because you want to absorb it and take it in as your own. And as the player, you're trying to figure out just what the hell a gravitational transport controller is. Not that there is something like that, but anyway. So the soul character allows you to really ask questions of the GM that under normal circumstances you wouldn't necessarily ask. So in a 40k game, for example, the GM takes it for granted that everyone assumes that everything is decorated with skulls. The soul character can then ask further questions as to are the skulls in any particular shape or pattern, and so on. The protector character is someone who, and this is your best bet, is sworn to protect the party that they're traveling with. This allows you to focus mainly on keeping them safe. So when they say, well, we're going to go forward and face those tigers in Africa because we're British explorers and it's 1880. As a player, you might have not any clue as to what Victorian sensibilities were like, but as a protector, you can step forward and say, no, James, I don't think it's safe, old boy. I think we should travel with great big armies first before we go across the bridge. The protector is obviously all about trying to keep the party safe, and it doesn't matter what system you happen to be in, that role is always going to be available because part of the game that we play, of course, is combat. So those are the two types that I would suggest you play, and when you combine that with a human fighter, sure, initially you might be going, oh, but that's so boring, that's so generic, I mean, come on, that's really dull. That's also almost every single lead character, whether they're in a fantasy series or in a science fiction series. So there's got to be something to that role, since we keep going back to it time and time and time and time again. The wizards and the priests are the ones who are the supporting characters. Even in The Lord of the Rings, it was a little hobbit who got all the limelight. And you could argue that he was as, well, maybe not as human as possible, but they certainly were very human, except for furry feet. And all he did was run around and avoid stuff, being almost like the sole character, with Sam being his protector. Sam didn't need to know how the elves worked or how the orcs worked or anything along those lines. He just needed to follow along and protect Frodo. So the idea here is that for the first session, at the very least, you want to be able to sit down and enjoy the game without stressing over, did I say the right thing? Have I charged the inversion couplings on the plasmodine relay systems? Have I done this? Have I done that? Oh, I don't know. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Now, if you want a good example of this, and I only do so because she's a very good friend of mine, and I know she'll take it with a smile, is we recently launched a Star Trek game, because we're in alpha testing of that game, and one of the players has no idea what Star Trek is. I too was shocked when I first heard that, but she has no idea what Star Trek is beyond the latest films, which of course most of us who are hardcore Trekkies don't call Star Trek, but very good entertaining science fiction action movie things. So we sat down with her and we said, okay, well, what do you want to play? And because they were pre-generated characters, she was playing a Vulcan. She had no idea what the Vulcans were and didn't give a fig about logic or Idic or the Kolinar or any of the other Vulcan rituals like Fal Tor Pan or anything along those lines for that matter. So we briefly gave her a crash course, and she did her very best to play a Vulcan. At one point, however, she did stop and she said, is this a logical thing for me to do? At which point we asked her if she thought it was logical, and when she replied yes, we said, well, carry on. So by choosing that race, it put her in an awkward position. If she hadn't chosen Vulcan, or at least if the character hadn't been written as a Vulcan, she wouldn't have been in that position, and she would have had a very good time because she chose to play a non-lead character, so not a leader or an ambassador, but she chose to play a supporting class. I think she eventually was a sort of a defender type, or a dependable type actually, and she had a very good time. I hope this has been helpful in how to quickly jump into a session, regardless of setting. And when you arrive at those cons and you see a module that, well, you just have no idea about the system or about the setting, don't be so off-put next time. Just sit down at the table and ask your fellow players, hey, can I play the fighter? And preferably, hopefully, they're a human fighter. So if it has been helpful, hit that like button. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Why not join us on www.greatgamemaster.com, where you can list all your questions that you might have on how to approach role-playing and how you would like to see yourself improve, perhaps, on being a better player. You can log all of those there, and then they'll get voted for by our Patreons. And, of course, you can join us on Patreon as well. We always enjoy new Patreons. So until next time, live long, and may the Force be with you.